Donald Trump is targeting the next city that he wants to invade and occupy with his military and his federalization of the police. The mayor of that city, Brandon Johnson, said he's not having it.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
I mean, I was wondering which mayor or which governor, someone was going to get ahead of this and basically tell their own law enforcement, we're not going to participate in this. Apparently that's what Brandon Johnson is doing. Let's see him talk about those things and how he's preparing for this potential invasion.
I'm signing an executive order today that will launch the Protecting Chicago Initiative. This is a project that builds on the months of preparation that we have done that has led up to this very moment. This order affirms that the Chicago Police Department will not collaborate with military personnel on police patrols or civil immigration enforcement. We will not have our police officers who are working hard every single day to drive down crime deputized to do traffic stops and checkpoints for the president. We do not want to see tanks in our streets. We do not want to see families ripped apart. We do not want grandmothers thrown into the back of unmarked vans. We don't want to see homeless Chicagoans harassed or disappeared by federal agents. And so this executive order makes it emphatically clear that this president is not going to come in and deputize our police department.
Not going to allow it to happen. This could be, I saw some other folks posting things like this. He signed that executive order ahead of time to make sure that there won't be any of this taking over of the Chicago Police Department to go against their citizens. He went into more details of the full nature of this administration and reasons why he's pushing back. And it made some people wonder and start thinking, man, these looks like preambles to civil war, which I don't know. I got to be honest. I feel like we haven't gotten to that kind of point yet, but people kind of can't wait for that. But still, here's more.
We have received credible reports that we have days, not weeks, before our city sees some type of militarized activity by the federal government. It is unclear at this time what that will look like exactly. We may see militarized immigration enforcement. We may also see National Guard troops. We may even see active duty military and armed vehicles in our streets. We have not called for this. Our people have not asked for this. But nevertheless, we find ourselves having to respond to this. Let me be absolutely clear. Although we believe the reports we have received are highly credible, this is an erratic, impulsive administration, and it is not always possible to understand and know exactly how he will move. He could change his mind, he could reverse course. In fact, I encourage him to do that. But still, we take these threats seriously, and we find ourselves in a position where we must take immediate, drastic action to protect our people from federal overreach. I'm signing an executive order today that will launch the Protecting Chicago Initiative. This is a project that builds on the months of preparation that we have done that has led up to this very moment. Protecting Chicago will ensure that every Chicagoan knows their rights, that every single family is prepared, and every part of city government is directed to protect the people of Chicago from federal action. This sweeping executive order directs our Department of Law to pursue any and every legal mechanism to hold this administration accountable for violating the rights of Chicagoans.
Not only the push to make sure that the Chicago police don't join in on these type of things, which we'll see how that goes. He also pointed out how they're giving citizens information. Because as we saw in DC, right after they send in all these ICE agents and then send in National Guard eventually, and then eventually put rifles and guns and sidearms in their hands. All this stuff happened. And we saw people roving through neighborhoods, harassing people on their porches. And many people were like, yo, I can't sit on my porch anymore. So people need education on what it is that they can do just personally, and particularly in Black and brown neighborhoods because that's who criminals are, according to these Nazis. Black and brown folks. And so obviously Chicago's the next one because first of all, they have a black mayor. That's the big problem. So Tom Homan got a chance to respond to this. And you won't be surprised to see that all he's doing is bulldozing and talking about how there's crime, because that's what white supremacists have always said about anybody that they're going to attack.
When you get pushback as you head into Chicago from people like Mayor Johnson, what's your message to the mayor?
Get out of the way, because we're going to do it. Look, right after the election, when President Trump took the White House, the first operation that I was involved with was Chicago. Brandon Johnson says I wasn't welcome in Chicago. Well, the very next day I was in Chicago along with the task force. President Trump's committed to making Chicago great again, making it safe again, since they failed to do so.
Do you guys remember when Democratic presidents came into office and said, I don't care what any of these governors or these mayors say of these red cities and states, I'm coming and I'm cleaning this up. We're going to change that problem with their education system. We're going to change the problem with their crumbling infrastructure. We're going to change the problems with you stealing money from citizens and giving them nothing in return. We're going to stop all this madness because I think it's about time we modernize this country. You guys are living in the past. You guys are worshiping Confederate statues, these losers of previous wars in our country. I'm going to clean this up. And when these mayors and when these governors push back, I'm going to steamroll anyway. Do you guys remember that? You guys remember when Democrats always said that? Because I don't remember it. But we've begun to normalize guys like Tom Homan with marbles all in his mouth to talk about how he's going to go into every city he wants, no matter what the leadership there says, because Donald Trump wants him to. So if he thinks running through cities and then militarizing them and pointing guns in people's faces is actually stopping crime, or if it's just scaring citizens into not leaving their houses anymore, he's mistaken. But as similarly to what the Baltimore mayor said, to what I think the DC mayor said at one point, and specifically definitely what Mayor Johnson has been saying here, those things don't lessen crime. Those cities have had significant decreases in crime because they're doing initiatives and they're investing in these communities as we invest in genocides in Gaza, and as we also invest in Donald Trump's crypto and also invest in all these other billionaires who bought off Donald Trump to give away all of our money to. That's the thing they're investing in. They're not investing in communities because once that happens, we see differences.
We've said fund our education system, invest in affordable housing, ensure that we are collaborating to get guns off the streets of Chicago. We're stopping guns being trafficked in from states that voted for him. And so now we do all of this hard work, this group assignment in the city of Chicago, and he wants to come at the end of the year before the assignment is due to try to put his name on the paper. He is reckless and out of control. He is the biggest threat to our democracy that we've experienced in the history of our country.
They act like this country hasn't been overrun by law enforcement and punitive results and damages to folks, death, when people go on death row, all these they claim are crime deterrents. If those things were crime deterrents, then we wouldn't be the nation with the most incarcerated people in the world by far. But there's a business behind incarcerating people. Jeanine Pirro said she's not interested in stopping crime. I said it 3 times last week. She's not interested in stopping crime. She's interested in punitive damages. So she wants the crime to happen so they can look like tough guys, because the origins of this country are based in punitive damages and having this hierarchy of some people better than others, and other folks are more likely in their genes to commit crimes. They play off of that same energy that sparked the beginnings of this country and the reasons why we used other humans to prop up other folks' profits and businesses. When you invest in folks, in education and in our infrastructure and in our schools, in our communities and in housing and mental health, all these things that this administration has stripped and took out as soon as they got into office, you think they don't know what then happens? Do you think they don't think crime goes up more again then? All they have is the same line. Crime, 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 crime. It's what they want.
But Mayor Johnson is simply saying that you don't care about solving an actual problem. Listen here.
Care about solutions to gun violence or homelessness or immigration. They just don't want to see it. They don't want our communities to be safer for all of us. They just want to play on people's fears.
Your reaction, Tom?
It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like I just said, we took guns off the street that were fully automatic in the city of Chicago. That's a solution. We took child sexual predators, people who committed sexual crimes against children off the streets of Chicago. That's a solution. Taking public safety threats off the streets of Chicago makes Chicago safer. If he had 1 ounce of integrity, he would thank President Trump for making Chicago safer every day. Every day, ICE is taking thousands of criminals off the street of this country, including Chicago. We have a big operation up there that's continuing, and it's about to get a lot bigger.
As you can see, all he's got is the same lines. We took child sex, human traffickers, drug dealers, gang members, murderers off the streets. Where's the verifiable facts behind that? And also in Washington, D.C., they said that they've eliminated all this crime. And actually, the stats behind that show that there was actually more arrests and actually more crime prevention happening a year ago in the same period of time. But still, they think the military is supposed to be in the streets and that'll stop these things. But at the same time, he cites all of these accomplishments and arrests that they've made. Again, in DC, there's what they call this black hole of information based off of these arrests and convictions that they're doing, because what they're doing is just running in and claiming that they're doing all this stuff. Who knows to what degree? Of course, they're arresting people. And if it's at a higher number, we've seen many of the 66-year-old women that are working on fruit stands or folks in the gardens doing their job, or folks outside of Home Depot that are looking for work, and they just claim they're all violent sex trafficking criminals, when for some reason, the violent sex trafficking criminal, the 34-time felon in the White House, still covering up the biggest sex child trafficking ring ever, is still trying to cover this whole thing up, and they haven't targeted him yet. It's almost like it has nothing to do with the crime. There's a problem that's happening with their approach here. It's happened in California with the National Guard that they sent there.
In closing arguments yesterday, the government says the federal law that restricts the use of the military for domestic law enforcement does not apply in this case. Attorneys for California say the government is engaged in unprecedented conduct.
What the Justice Department was arguing was, for one, that there's no precedent here for this lawsuit. They also said that the law that was at the very center of this trial, Errol, doesn't apply because of the authority that President Trump used to bring in the National Guard. The other thing that they said is that this court doesn't have the ability or the authority to issue an injunction. And when it comes to the law that this trial was about, the Posse Comitatus law that we've talked about, it says the military cannot be used for domestic law enforcement. He said, if you don't think that applies, why did I hear all of this testimony from a major general who was the commanding general of the task force in Los Angeles about how they were aware of that law, how there were procedures and trainings to make sure that the troops were in compliance with that law? He said it certainly seems as though they were trying to comply with that law. And he also said to the lawyer, you know, if you don't think it applies, why don't you just advise your client not to follow it?
In that decision, as we saw on CBS News talking about how it looked like they were getting spoken down in court, here's some of the results. Aaron Reichlin Melnick, who's of the American Immigration Council, posted about what happened. He says, Judge Breyer blocks the use of National Guard in Los Angeles. Defendants' orders, and contrary to Congress's explicit instruction, federal troops, they said they executed the laws. That's what the defendants said. But in short, defendants violated the Posse Comitatus Act. He says Judge Breyer cites the statements made by Trump and the Department of Defense Secretary Hegseth about deploying the National Guard around the country in blue cities as grounds for finding that it's necessary to issue an injunction blocking the Trump administration from continuing to violate the law. Judge Breyer's injunction, if it ever goes into effect, would bar Trump from using the National Guard and any military troops in California to engage in, quote, security patrols, traffic control, crowd control, riot control, and other similar tasks. This only impacts California for now, and it's likely not going to go into effect given that the Supreme Court is ruling consistently in Donald Trump's favor. But it does set good precedent for other challenges going forward, given his findings about what constitutes a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. I'm sure I said that law wrong a couple of times, but you get the picture. Their arguments fly in the face of actual legal precedent. normal law, normal approach to using the National Guard, because the purpose is to intimidate and violate people's rights. That's the whole purpose of this guy. What they think is legitimizing their moves is to say wild things like what Tom Homan says. So I'm gonna leave you guys with this. Christy Noam, who doesn't know what she's doing, on Face the Nation this Sunday. And she was talking about what is it they're doing in Los Angeles, and just listen to the comical way that they go about this in the face of reality and legal precedent. This is what their arguments usually consist of.
Part of what distinguished the Los Angeles operations, however, is that National Guard troops were there, in essence, protecting or backing up those federal agents as they conducted operations. Is that what we should expect to see in Chicago?
You know, that always is a prerogative of President Trump and his decision. I won't speak to the specifics of the operations that are planned in other cities, but I do know that LA wouldn't be standing today if President Trump hadn't taken action. Then that city would have burned down if left to the devices of the mayor and the governor of that state. And so the citizens who live there, the small business owners in downtown LA, they're thankful that President Trump came in with federal law enforcement officers and helped support keeping those streets open, keep their homes and businesses from burning down, and made sure the law and order was restored.
I just want to clarify one thing you said there. You said LA wouldn't be standing if not for these federal deployments?
So many of those homes and businesses that were in downtown LA and in those areas were dealing with riots and violence, and coming in and bringing those federal law enforcement officers in was incredibly important to keeping peace.
There's a reason that judges keep ruling against these clowns. That idiot is talking about how LA would not be standing right now. The any kind of conflict that happened in LA was because he sent in agents who started terrorizing people of the city. The reasons why people rose up and were marching in the streets is because he sent in folks with violence hell bent on their minds, and had masks over their faces, and drove up in unmarked cars and started attacking old ladies and snatching children from their mothers, and then going to immigration hearings that they say you're supposed to do it the right way, as Republicans always talk about in this country. As people did it the right way, they went and started taking people away from their legal immigration hearings. But in order to try and scare enough people, because scary Los Angeles is to say we've taken all these violent criminals off the streets and the place wouldn't even be standing today, bro. You know what? The small business owners, they thank us every day that you saved our city, because LA apparently didn't exist for all these years with all of these folks in that city until Donald Trump came along and invaded it and tried to occupy it with the National Guard, because that's how things work. It's cartoonish stuff. You tell these stories to 5-year-olds and they'd be like, this is weird. This isn't a very good story. I feel like you're lying.